Can we talk about some of the benefits of carbohydrates? Because I feel like carbohydrates they are often vilified, but there are some very significant benefits to eating carbohydrates. I mean, you came into my house.
I was very angry.
You're like, Max, where are the carbs?
Well, what I want to know, what has gotten you interested in this? Because did something happen where you're like, gosh, I've been trying low carb and I'm training, although I don't know, and you're like bonking and you need carbs. What happened?
Well, first of all, there was an observation that I made where, I do tend to follow bodybuilding to some degree, at least on social media. And, it's rare to find bodybuilders that are low carb. I mean, you can find them, but it's like, look at Chris Bumstead, right? Like, look at any professional bodybuilder. Like, from my observation, my amateur observation, it's like when in prep mode, they're keeping their carbohydrates as high as they can, and they're still getting shredded. So it's like carbohydrates are not inherently fattening. That was like the first, observation that I made. And then on top of that, in 2020, I took up boxing, and I noticed that without a little bit of carbs in my system, I would bonk. I would just get like...
I remember when you were boxing, you had that boxing. I was wondering where that was in this studio.
Yeah.
It's like gone now.
It was a short-lived hobby of mine. I was like sparring one day with my trainer, and I got hit in the head, and I was like, nope, I'm out.
That's hilarious, but not funny. That is important to recognize, is that, number one, those guys, their goal is hypertrophy and maintaining skeletal muscle. So they have a very defined diet. And I'm glad that you brought this up, because one of the things that I think is a challenge is most people do not count calories. We were talking before, my playbook has a strategy for eating where they don't have to count calories. You can visualize it on your plate. And what we recommend is a 1-to-1 ratio of protein to carbohydrates, to not actually go over that. And here's why. And again, if you're metabolically unhealthy and you feel like you need to cut carbohydrates, then you can, but inherently you don't have to have a low carbohydrate diet, because think about it. If you cover your protein needs, which is critical, it's essential, and then you think about as a plate, right? There's a plate, you've got one portion of the plate is protein, so 1/3 of the plate is protein. Depending on your activity, 1/3 is carbohydrates. You and I were joking, it could be potato, right? Because we're like, oh my God, you eat potato? Yeah, man, give me some rice cakes too. But also, I woke up and I trained today. And then the other 1/3 would be some kind of fibrous vegetable. There's a fiber ratio. You don't want a ton of, for example, banana is very high in carbohydrates. A small banana might have 30 grams of carbs. You don't need all that. But then if you begin to think about, how do I balance a plate for metabolic health, it becomes very simple. And, part of the challenge for people is it feels overwhelming and it feels overcomplicated, and it doesn't have to be. It doesn't.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think it's like important to, people literally are out there on social media fear-mongering fruit and carbs, and, carbohydrates are muscle sparing, right? They're protein sparing. Underneath the bucket of carbohydrates, you have fiber. And fiber, even though it's a non-digestible carbohydrate, it's still counted, not maybe in terms of net carbohydrates, but like a net carbohydrate contribution, but it's still like a form of carb. And so I noticed that, like, people, when you eat carbs, it keeps your muscles full, right?
Glycogen, muscle glycogen. And that becomes important if you, number one, want to be able to perform. Again, and also your body will become accustomed. So you want your muscle to burn fatty acid at rest.
Like, I think people think of you as like the protein queen, but you came into my house asking for carbs.
And what did I do last year? Come into your house asking for what?
Carbs.
Exactly. I already have, protein is easy to get covered. It is. And my diet is high in protein, but it is also moderate to probably higher in carbohydrates. Again, you see me, I'm like all over the place. I'm moving around, and so I'm very active. And, one of the things that happens is that people are sedentary and they move less. And in midlife, there's some belief that as estrogen declines, people's spontaneous movement goes down. And in order to, I think of muscle like this. Muscle is like a suitcase. You open the suitcase and you're going on a trip for 4 days. Now, if you're like me, you open the suitcase And instead of packing for 4 days, you're packing for 40. And I got 5 pairs of shoes and 3 sweaters and 2 jackets. There is no way that I'm getting my clothes in that small little carry-on. So of course I close it, and this is representation of muscle. I close the suitcase, and everything's everywhere. I cannot get any more clothes in that suitcase. Muscle is the same. So if you are not training and doing, both resistance training and cardiovascular both have 2 different impacts. But if you are not dumping that muscle glycogen and utilizing that fuel, then when you are eating and opening up your suitcase and stuffing more clothes in there, you've not emptied the first trip out. And so glucose, fatty acids, branched chain amino acids remain in the bloodstream. They have nowhere to go. Eventually, it'll get stored as adipose tissue or some, it will have to be disposed of. And so, back to your original question, low carbohydrate diets, let's debunk it. Is it good for everybody? It's not necessary for everybody. Can it be helpful? Yes. But I think an even bigger, more important conversation is how do we eat for muscle health, and how do we define muscle health, and how do we begin to think about it? So if you are over-consuming carbohydrates, and let's say you're not even over-consuming them, but you have done nothing, your muscle is already full. Your muscle glycogen is full, right? So as you're in an overnight fast, maybe you're using some liver glycogen, but liver glycogen stores are probably 100 grams.
Not much.
Not much. So the other point that you made is carbohydrates, they ride along with fiber, also very good. Phytonutrients, nutrients and things that we don't get from animal-based products. I think that that's really important. And so we're not vilifying one group over the other. And, I do think that there's a lot of discussion around timing, carbohydrate timing. And I think that's less important. It's more of an overall 24-hour period, unless you are doing some major endurance activity. So my husband, Shane, loves to run marathons. He's bananas. And if he does not have carbohydrates, but then again, there's Zach Bitter, who is a low-carb ultra guy. And I think that there's interpersonal variability and ways in which we train the muscle to respond, and we can fuel it appropriately. But it's also very easy to tell if your carbohydrate intake is too high. And that is by looking at your blood work, which would be reflective of healthy skeletal muscle.
Are you a fan of CGMs?
I use them and I don't use them. I haven't used them for a while. I think it's helpful if you want to know what affects you, which is interesting to think that blueberries, those half-eaten pint of blueberries, could affect me differently than they affect you. And that is interesting. But yes, I have used CGMs. I recommend them to patients if they need it, but it's not a necessity.
Yeah. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.